Welcome to the Immersive Lab, where we explore the cutting edge of retail experiences that blend innovation, entertainment, and technology. Today, I'm excited to be joined by David Polinchock, co-founder and president of the Brand Experience Lab and a true pioneer in immersive retail technology. David's journey is fascinating. If you're not connected with him on LinkedIn, reach out, say hi. But just for a brief side of things, I believe you worked with industry giants like Microsoft, Pepsi, AT&T, and my favorite, Disney. Just,
Yeah,
cutting the surface.
I've been around a lot. Yes. So,
Which is
yeah,
an
it's been
absolute
fun.
blast, though. You're an incredible ambassador for where immersive is going, and I am so excited to talk with you today.
I'm glad that we're able to get this together. So this should be a lot of fun.
So here's the background. David came up to Toronto, I think it was last year,
It was
and
last year,
reached
yeah.
out and said, "We want to have a discussion. Are you free? We're in the downtown core. Meet up with us. Let's walk and talk."
Right.
And it was incredible. We were able to walk around, see unique things, and I realized at that point that I'm not alone. There are people like me out there in the world, and we love to talk about retail.
We do. We do. And we really, I think that's what's been most fun about this journey for me is, again, as you're saying, running into people like you who are just as passionate about how retail needs to grow and change with the world we live in today.
Absolutely. And it's only going to get more and more fun. And I know that in certain aspects with the brick and mortar side, fun is relative term because fun is
Right.
also expensive. And in our world of finding and touching so many brands, it's amazing to see which brands are moving ahead and which brands are sticking behind. And
Right.
the ones who are sticking behind, I feel like they potentially could lose market share because they're not realizing what business they're actually in.
When you look at the landscape of retail over, let's call it even the last 100 years, when you look at Sears, which basically created e-commerce, right? You got a catalog, you looked at things, you called a number, they delivered it, by the way, they drop shipped it to the store closest to you, right? And to watch a brand like that just fade away because they couldn't get out of their own way is really sad. And then conversely, you look at a brand like Abercrombie, which, 100 years ago supplied hiking, adventure clothing to Teddy Roosevelt. And maybe their clothing, works for a different kind of adventure today. But they're certainly not doing safari clothing, and they're certainly not out there, doing what they did. But they've been able to constantly reinvent themselves, from a store. I'm not their target audience on any level, but even when I was younger, I wasn't, but from a store that was, you couldn't, as an old guy, you couldn't see anything in there. That they had a lot of perfume smells that were just overwhelming for us, to this brightly lit store with wide aisles. And, there are brands that are doing that really well.
Yeah, and there's other ones where I feel like they've hit their pinnacle, and their
Yes.
pinnacle is not a good sign for them. And unfortunately, market is what market does, and they can listen to as many people as they can. But when you can't get out of your own way to realize it's just small things that they can change,
Right.
but you have to start with something.
Well, and I think, this is, again, one of the things we talk a lot about here. And clearly I know you're going to relate to this 100,000%, right? Part of the problem is the reason retail was what retail was and was for decades and centuries is because the people running the store were passionate about what they were doing, right? It wasn't a gig. It wasn't something they did as an hour. I mean, there were people who did that, right? But the people who started these stores, they didn't get together and go, you know what I want? I want a store that's kind of dull and boring and doesn't really stand for anything. Like, that would really make me excited. They were like, I'm going to do this. You went to a department store because you saw things that you would never see in a million years in your town. even being in a larger city like a New York or Philadelphia, whatever. Um, and honestly, today you just don't have passionate people running the businesses for the most part. You have people who see it as just another way to generate revenue and not a way to touch customers and human beings.
Yeah, we call them lovingly pylons.
Yeah,
And the idea is that a pylon is an individual who is fulfilling a role that with or without them, there is no path forward.
wow,
And that's something that you see in certain businesses. I think the creativity in certain retail stops at head office level, because the difference between head office and the folks who actually walk through the stores, when a CEO or a CMO or any of the C-suite walk through a store, even as far down the pattern to like a district manager,
right.
there are certain times where when those individuals come to the store, you're given as a retailer an abundance of hours, labor, in order to make the store perfect.
Right.
But is that really what your customer is seeing? No, it's specifically for the suits that come in,
Right.
and they are being
Exactly.
given a show. Where you and I come from Disney, we know the difference between good show and bad show.
Yep.
And on this end, a good show is whether or not it's the CEO of a company or an individual who is very like a high school kid. They should be getting the same experience, but they're not.
Right. And that is, that's a big thing. So you mentioned Disney. I was there in 1981. So I was there when in Orlando. I was there when only the Magic Kingdom existed. We didn't have Epcot Center yet. And my understanding, because it was about a year before I got there, was that under the Walt rules of running the kingdom, no maintenance work was done during the day when the park was
100%.
open. So it did not occur until the park was closed, which meant they were paying double and triple overtime to union employees to make sure that when the gates opened in the morning, it looked like it was the first time the park had ever opened.
Yeah, the
And,
lights were done, all the paint, everything like that was immaculate.
right. Unless there was an emergency maintenance that needed to be done, all standard maintenance was done after hours. And that, again, as a CFO, right, you'd go, what are you, out of your freaking minds? We're paying triple overtime because you don't want to see somebody with a paintbrush? That's stupid. But as an experience that, whenever you talk to anybody about Disney, anybody who's ever been to a Disney park, the very first thing they say is, wow, it's so clean. Right? I mean, yes, they'll get to the rides and the attractions and the whatever, but invariably being clean is right at the top. And, it's expensive to be clean. It's expensive to be fresh and look brand new every day. And let me rephrase that. It is expensive on a balance sheet to do that. It is equally as expensive on a customer sheet to not do that.
Absolutely.
And
we've talked like a lot about the idea around why Disney was the pinnacle. I will share at this exact moment, I don't believe it to be the pinnacle. I believe things have changed over the last decade and a half. That things it's not as important to keep on, but that's a pendulum, and it happens in every business. You have revenue enhancers, revenue generators, and then you have things that cost money.
Right.
And there are times where you have to go back and forth. That's ebb and flow in any business.
Right. But again, part of one of the things we talk about, and I know you talk about it because you and I have talked about this, right? We have so many options today. Right? If I need a new shirt, there's a million places for me to buy a new shirt. I can buy it online, I can buy it offline, I can buy it in any one of 1,000 stores. There's just so many options. And people don't understand that they need to influence me to be so that their option is the only option I go for, right? You can do that by price, without a doubt. If your product is cheaper than somebody else's product, that will drive a certain amount of. The problem with when you're just on price is it just means somebody could always be cheaper. And then, as they say, you're just to that race in the bottom. Like, can I get cheaper? Can I get cheaper? Can I get cheaper? One of the things, and again, I know we talk about them a lot in this industry, is, I'm not aware that I've ever seen Apple do a clearance sale.
That's really true. It's the same conversation as why for years we never saw Starbucks advertise. Right. There's just certain things that in black and white, looking back into the ethos, there wasn't that. Obviously, Apple would have to, because when you go from Apple, an iPhone 13 to 14,
right,
what happens to that inventory overnight?
Right. And they certainly do, but you've never, when I do holiday mall walkarounds, we're now at a place where if you don't say 50% discount or more, nobody's even in your store, But again, you've never really seen that at an Apple. There's no big holiday promotion. I mean, you might get if you buy this, we'll give you this or something like that. There's not really ever a drop in price. And that is today, because we forget today that 15, 18, 20 years ago, Apple was an also-ran that nobody used, that only did not go out of business because the courts forced Microsoft to invest in them to avoid an antitrust lawsuit. And now Apple is what it is today, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure we have certainly seen, not to be mean to Apple, but we have certainly seen what happens when you go from a Steve Jobs, I want everything to be 1,000% perfect, and I will sweat every single detail, to a company that's like, well, how do we make our supply chain more efficient?
Yep. And things change on a day-to-day basis when you're looking at the revenues and the experiences. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you from the get-go, yep, which is you're talking so much about third places, the new third places, yep, this home and work, bringing everything together. And when, yep, you talked about Apple, I remember the Apple discussion where people would say, I can't work at a place that doesn't allow me to have an Apple, either a MacBook or an iPhone, yep, and they would force you into the Microsoft suite with Office, and they didn't like Excel, so you had to do one or the other. And
right.
I know for me personally, as a creative, I need to have everything at my fingertips. And the worst thing is to go into something where you can't be productive.
Right.
And my question to you is, how do you see physical retail blending and evolving into these experiential destinations, especially when we're becoming increasingly digital? Because when you bring up something like Apple, the physical retail actually is less important than the end result, which is we are providing you this digital experience.
Right.
And without this digital experience, you don't have anything. Why is that important to you?
So there's a couple of pieces to it. One of the things, and a gentleman named Max Lenderman, who I've known for many, many years, just posted on Post Cannes. We just had the Cannes Lions Advertising Festival in France there. And, we say this all the time as well. The more digital we become, the more the physical becomes important, right? Listen, love doing these things. We've been on Zooms together. It's all great. But it's not as great as when you and I walk stores together and we're just chatting.
Or if we're on a keynote, let's put you and I on stage,
right,
at an ICSC or some sort of a physical thing where we can banter back and forth.
Exactly. It's a very different experience. So, we went from really everything being separate. In my dad's work day, yeah, you occasionally had dinner with the boss, but it wasn't something you really wanted to do. You know what I mean? He at 5 o'clock he wanted to go home, for the most part. To a time when work and the third place were the same place. I had foosball tables, the Googleplexes, the Facebook campuses where I did everything in one place. Then COVID hits, we can't go to work at all anymore. And then we start to realize that I'm in the New York metro area. I don't know what it's like by you, but that hour commute each way, if everything is working perfectly, which happens about 50% of the time, is not that cool, and I'm losing a lot.
I showed you about the Toronto traffic issue. Every single person that comes through Toronto is talking about the issue, to the extent that NHL teams and NBA teams have had to walk instead of take the thing, because it's just, that's the infrastructure. So the commute back in the day, and we've talked a lot about this in the job recruiting side, which is if you are not accounting for the time that you are investing into getting to the job,
right,
that 8-hour job is actually up to 12 easily.
Right. Easily. So the flip side to that is if you're just graduating college and you're coming into the workplace, and maybe you've moved to a new city because you took a job, and you're in your studio or one-bedroom apartment, you start to realize that making friends and meeting people is really hard. Like even if you didn't like everyone you worked with, there were people you did like. So you had a network that you could kind of hang with, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one piece, right? We've had this real upheaval of our physical social connections and what that means. On the other side, we don't need inventory in our stores anymore to the level that we used to have. I remember working with a large, fashion company and their store in Soho, which was below my office. And the manager there was so excited because they had 5,000 pairs of jeans in stock, which today you'd be fired like in an instant because you were so stupid for having that much inventory in a store.
Yep.
So, but we also can't just throw all this vacant real estate space into the marketplace without tanking the economies around the world. So you have this emotional human need for contact and to be with other people. And you have all these stores with a lot of space that they're not using well. And it seems like there is an opportunity to take advantage of those two things coming together. We see it in, a lot of small stores. Like, if you're a runner, there, like in New York, the Fleet Feet store is where runners gather. In fact, the one up by Central Park has lockers and stuff there so that you can come and you could drop your backpack and you can do that, because you don't necessarily want to go home to Brooklyn if you're going to do a run in Central Park. So, to have those, so you have a lot of places that created small communities like that, and we're starting to see more and more that if I every day gather a group of people who are believers in my brand and therefore have something in common with each other, that there could be that opportunity to engage them in a different way. It is not always the case, but in a lot of Apple stores, and, if you're listening to this podcast, go try this at your Apple store, there's no music playing. And as I say, this is not research, this is just my thing, it's because it's the people in an Apple store talking to each other that is the soundtrack of an Apple store. So we have this huge opportunity to say, hey, let's gather people together who do a common thing, and let's see how we can help each other. I go to a store. I love them. I buy a lot of stuff from them. There's a company called Duluth Trading, which started in Duluth, Minnesota.
Of course.
And is real work clothes. It is, designed for the working person. And a lot of contractor clothing. And, as I've grown over the years, and not in a mental way. It's forgiving clothing. And it's great. And I love their stuff. And their people are awesome and they take great care of you. But it'd be kind of cool to see them start to use some of their real estate space to say, hey, today we're going to talk about how you do this.
Yeah.
We're
Do you
going to have
remember back in the day with Eddie Bauer? I remember
Yes,
when Eddie Bauer used to, part of your ethos as an employee was you were hired based on whether or not you were part of outside clubs, and you'd be
exactly
able
right.
to. And I think Lululemon kind of took
Lululemon
that.
used to do that a lot. Certainly places like REI.
Yeah.
We all know. So in New York City, it would be Fleet Feet. It would be Paragon Sports as examples of places where when I was running and I needed running information about shoes, I didn't go to just a sporting goods store.
Yeah,
I
you
went
didn't go to
to
Saks. You didn't go to
right
a department store. You went to the authority.
to the authority, to the guy who would say, okay, go run 20 feet. Let me watch how you run.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're always going to need that level of expert. The problem is because too many retailers view employees as disposable expense. Ooh, I'm having a rough quarter. I'll just lay off 20% of my people. Right. They're not understanding that there are multiple reasons we go to a store, right? Obviously, the product has to deliver whatever the product is supposed to deliver, right? That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
There has to be value, right? Doesn't need to be cheap. It just needs to give me a good value as I perceive value. But a lot of it we go to because I like Sue or Bob, the person who works there, and they always take care of me. And when I go to the Duluth store here in New Jersey, I mean, it's possible I shop there too much so that they know me really well, but they seem to know me really well, and we all appreciate that. We need that connection, and too many stores, like I said, just view employees as a disposable expense that I can get rid of and put back depending upon what's happening on any given day, and not really understand that that's one of the reasons I go to a store or don't go to a store.
Yeah. The retail side of what is it called? It's the insights into the past. The reason why in government you would continuously have the non-political appointees because they
Right.
were the ones that knew how to turn things on, things off.
The
It was less
institutional knowledge.
institutional knowledge, which is from the West Wing. And I love that season when they talk about institutional knowledge
Yeah.
of the bypassing of, you have one administration come in and they need to know where the staplers are. Basic things.
Yes.
We don't have that in the retail side anymore because the institutional knowledge are the folks who get up, and out.
Right.
And when you're training someone, you're never giving them 100%, you're giving them 80% because of job security.
Right.
There's elements that go into what makes a retail store special, which is why Eddie Bauer was a real guy.
Right. That's right. And if you think about it, this is also part of the same thing. Being a retail store clerk level, not upper management level, used to be a career.
100%.
Right? People did
Yep.
that for their whole life.
My dad was with Walmart for 40 years, and he made it up to an assistant manager. And he was happy because once you
Right.
get to a store manager and above, that's when they burn and churn.
Right.
But he was happy to be, it provided for his family. It bought him houses. It allowed him to be satisfied.
Right. And it doesn't do that anymore today.
No.
And that's where, I have a degree in theater. So naturally that meant I'm legally required to wait tables. It's part of your degree program.
Absolutely.
And I used to work for TGI Fridays. I waited twice over the years for TGI Fridays. TGI Fridays used to do things called the TGI Fridays Passport. So to get a passport as an employee, it was an employee perk. You had to be there I think it was at least 6 months. It might have been longer than that. But then for 3 months, I believe, in a row, your peers needed to rank you as the best in your area. Best bartender, best waiter, best chef, whatever the category was. If you did that, then you got a TGI Fridays passport. And the passport allowed you to walk into any TGI Fridays in the world and pick up a shift.
Oh, wow.
So what would happen is you'd have these people who had been there years and they got their passport, and then they would take the summer off. They would just hang around, go visit. I shouldn't say hang around. They'd go vacation for the summer. And when they needed cash, they'd show up at a TGI Fridays and say, I've got a passport, and they would get a shift. And I was in Orlando, so we had a lot of people, doing that with us. And then invariably somebody in the store would say, hey, do you need a place to crash? Right? Because if you're a passport holder at Fridays, that assumes certain things about you as a human being. That was such a great perk. And, I just had a conversation with some folks about this last week. You talk to so many retail brands particularly, and they will say things like, oh, we don't let our employees be part of our perk program because they'll abuse it. And it's just like, hey, buds, that's just first of all,
it's backwards.
Yeah. The first thing you're saying is we think all our employees are shit, right? Because they're going to abuse us. And right. So that's a good statement. And then you're not giving them the encouragement to live and love your brand.
Yeah.
And that becomes a real, negative for everybody.
We saw that at when I worked for Disney and I came back to Canada and got hired on with the Disney stores. The us versus them mentality was prevalent at that point, which is parks versus stores. We're seeing that in other demographics around the globe. And I'm finding it so interesting to talk to brands who are trying to bring things back to where it was, where your employees were based on your experience and you were able to be a part of a family. And it's never going to go all the way back. That's right. For sure. It's never going to go all the way back. But I look at some of the historical sides of businesses that you've worked for in the past, and going into those experiences right now, first off, would you ever be able to get hired with some of these jobs again? And is there any reason why these brands don't get it?
So again, I've written a lot about, I've complained about this, and I have written about it on occasion. So 1981, I'm an employee at Disney. There's only the Magic Kingdom, right? But that means there's 25,000 or so employees, right? Our holiday party was that 2 Saturdays in December, they closed the park at 6:00. And, one group worked one Saturday and then came back and partied the next Saturday. And I was able to, you got a ticket for you and 3 other people. Could you imagine Disney doing that today? Could you imagine them investing so much in that? And for me, again, Disney, everybody says Disney's a magical place, right? One of the main reasons it's a magical place is because they're awesome employees, right? Who will just, really, about the only thing you couldn't do when I was there, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you couldn't cross lands, right?
Yes.
If I picked up a small child who was separated from their family in Frontierland, I couldn't walk into Tomorrowland to bring the kid back. I'd have to meet somebody at the border. Yeah. And hand them off.
Where things have changed so much, because now you're seeing people from cast members from every single land doing parade setup. And so they'll have every costume you can imagine from, the butlers in the Haunted Mansion right next to the Space Mountain folks. Yeah. And you're just like, ooh, show. But I understand it.
Right. You know what? So one of the things I did was the 10th anniversary parade, called the Tencennial Parade, and then the Electric Light Parade in Orlando. And I, every now and then I pulled back this piece that I wrote, because if you've ever done a parade at Disney, you're waiting backstage. And with the Electric Light Parade as a specific was that, that kind of electronic music. And then you hear ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And it was like, man, that was so exciting to me. that
The
because
Baroque hoedown.
the Baroque hoedown, which even they might be giants covered, um, and and you knew that you were walking out into a place to bring incredible joy to a whole lot of people, right? But at the end of the day, if Disney was treating me like crap, I wouldn't be that inspired,
Yeah.
honestly.
Do you remember the idea around when you left Disney and what that next job was? Like, where was there a mindset where you were like, I'm now no longer at Disney, and so at that point, I either your standards have lowered or you shifted your mindset into saying not everything is going to be that pinnacle.
So I got very lucky. When I was at Disney, I was allowed by Disney to create the Walt Disney World Youth Theater Club. So we were a group of cast members who did live children's theater. And I was allowed to use the Disney name and go into the community and give performances. And I actually got hired by the Arts Council to give performances. And then the Arts Council hired me to administer this program. So I left Disney to go to the Arts Council in Orlando. And while I was there, I found out there was a thing called the Consulate Convention that was going to be hosted at Disney. And it was this big international thing. And I decided we should do an international performing arts festival to coincide with that. The Disney event did not happen. We continued to do the arts festival. And if you've ever been to any street fair in the history of mankind, it doesn't matter. You could be on any ethnic food, area, and they always sell sausage and peppers, and everything's the same. So when I got there and we started doing this festival, I said two things. First of all, you can only sell food that is indicative of your culture. And number two is you needed to send us the menu in advance because we were going to print all the menu boards so that they all look the same. And people were, especially guys who were food carnies, they were like, the hell are you doing? Like, that's not how this is done. I'm like, but one of the things at Disney is it didn't matter what food place you walked into, the menu was consistent. It was the same font size. You weren't trying to figure out where it was. It was
synergy, corporate synergy.
Right? It worked. So I tried to bring, the Disney, and I still get in trouble for talking the Disney way. There are still things that are just right about how Walt, again, if you think about the long history of Disney, the theme parks at any rate, you were going from carnies that, to this, like they have to wear costumes. They don't do that. They're just, people. We just grabbed off the street and throw them in to run this attraction here.
Well, the first Mickey Mouse costumes were from the skating on parade thing, where they would be touring around and they needed someone and they didn't have anything at Disneyland, so they brought in the carnies. And the stories around the Seven Dwarfs original movie premiere, like things like that are just legacy, but that's inside the bubble versus outside.
Well, and a little funny side story. So in 82, I guess, the characters decided to go union, and none of the performing unions would take them. They won't like that I said it like that, but basically they were not accepted by any of the performers. And there was an article in the Orlando Sentinel the morning of October 1st, 1982, when they were opening Epcot. And the article started by saying, I'm at a diner with Mickey Mouse. He's on his third cup of coffee and he smoked, he's on a second cigarette. And it really torqued the Disney people no end. Turns out they became Teamsters. And then realized that meant they had to work a whole lot more than they had to work as under the character.
Absolutely, because that's the idea. I do have a question, because this is kind of fun. Your theater background coincides very, very prominently with your retail background.
Yes.
When you go to shows right now, we did 2 shows in London. We saw Back to the Future and we saw Mousetrap. We saw multiple shows in New York the last time we were there, was Shucked and with Hadestown. What's your opinion on the future of retail with touring and Broadway shows? And do you think that anyone can step up to the sheer merchandising ability of a Universal, a Disney, or a Fox powerhouse?
It's a great question. And I think one of it is a hard thing when you're a retail person, because we all do this. The first time I went to the Smithsonian, and it was maybe a minute after closing, 5 o'clock. And I went to the gift store and they were like, no, we're closed already. And I was like, no, you don't close until a half an hour after I don't understand this mentality. I think that's one of the things, there's a lot of times now that we don't realize the power of merchandise. We don't realize that when Planet Hollywood and Hard Rock were in their heyday and the big things, they used to talk all the time about the artifact of the experience, right? That you wanted to take home a piece. That's why Disney merchandise is billions of dollars. And that was part of the original challenge with the stores, because there was no experience. They didn't know how to balance the lack of experience with the artifact. And at Disney, any of the Disney parks anywhere in the world, or the Universal parks, that artifact is critical to your experience. You don't go home without the T-shirt that says, I went to Disney World. Right.
Do you see, I have from like Cirque du Soleil shows now,
right,
where it's just common sense at this point.
And I just want to say, Dustin, that a whole bunch of people watching this podcast just went, oh my God, that's a real wall.
Oh yeah. It's full out, like, my friends. Welcome.
They assumed it was, a little CGI background there. So, and conversely, this was funny. I bought the Roots hat from the Vancouver Olympics without actually going to the Vancouver Olympics. I thought it was a cool hat.
Yep.
I've worn it maybe twice, because every time, the 2 times I wore it, people went, oh, were you at the Olympics? Wasn't that the coolest thing ever? And then you'd have to go, no, I didn't really go, or you'd have to lie, and it became a negative experience. I think, we don't understand a couple layers to that, right? One is, you went to see Hadestown, awesome show, right? You can tell people about the show. Without a doubt, you're going to give it word of mouth, assuming you liked it. But equally as powerful, you're going to wear the shirt, or you're going to wear something of the show that people are going to ask you about,
Yeah.
and that's going to spark a conversation. And I don't think people realize, and that's different than, I'm going to sell you the $200 T-shirt because I can rip you off because you're at a Broadway theater. This is
I do have the Beetlejuice T-shirt, but the conversation kind of spins, because when you look at different shows, touring and otherwise, London doesn't have a playbill, so they sell you the playbill that you can get autographed and tagged afterwards.
Right. Yeah, we just saw. So my whole family were big fans of a TV show called Schmigadoon. Or Schmicago, if you watch the second season. And so we got to see Schmigadoon live in Washington, D.C., right? And again, and I gave them grief. I was like, how are you not selling merchandise? How is there not a Schmigadoon T-shirt?
Yep. We saw with when you see, and Broadway is different, but like when you go and you see some of these touring shows, comedians are horrible at it. Podcasts are even worse. The real, folks, when you look at the Kevin Smiths or the Weird Al or those types of folks, they understand it. But the issue is that when you're touring, you should always think about the 20 to 30% of your revenue coming from your retail. Exactly right.
And like, I've worked with a lot of organizations that will do things like, we'll just use the same shirt year after year after year, right? Because if you put a date on it, then you date the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's just the complete opposite. If the shirt looks the same every year, then there's no reason, right? If I go to a festival or something every year, I want it to say 2025, 2026, 2027. I want to build that longevity that I've been part of the event.
Yeah.
And We go one of two ways, unfortunately. We either have no merch at all, or we have ridiculously poor quality, overpriced merch. And we just, a lot of people just don't understand, the power of merch. And, and this, I'm going to weave AI into this conversation because we're all talking about AI and its impact on retail. And one of the things I talk about is that AI is very, very good at synthesizing a lot of data into something. It is good at that. None. A lot of our shopping has no basis on logical progression, right? I told the story a couple of weeks ago. I was in Buffalo, and I hadn't been to Buffalo since college days. And I said to I was on the panel, I said, listen, I'm going to buy a T-shirt because I'm here at Niagara Falls. And my wife, when I come home, is going to say, why did you buy a T-shirt? You have 4,000 T-shirts. You didn't need another T-shirt. And I'm going to say, but I was in Buffalo. Like, how could I not get a T-shirt? I went and it was a hoot. If you haven't been there, this is a hoot of a place and their merchandise is awesome. I went to the Grand Ole Opry a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
I got to see a live Friday night show. I did not realize what a radio show like setup it is. It's fantastic. But again, there was no way I was leaving that building without a shirt.
How was the gift shop?
The gift shop was awesome.
Good.
I mean, I spent a lot of money. The other thing that they did, and this was great. So the Opry has a well-known, I'm blanking on the name, but a well-known printer style who does all their posters.
Sure.
So I was there on a Friday night, not like a, big star-laden, Dolly Parton wasn't there, but every time they do a show, which is like 2 or 3 times a week, they print a poster just for that show.
It's called Hatch Show.
Yes. And they're a very unique style.
Yep.
They're beautiful. It was $20. There was no way I was not going to buy the poster of the show I saw that night.
Now, was it so when you think about that kind of, because that's the other big thing is the technology that needs to be implemented in a gift shop experience to do a on-demand, because you don't want to print 100,000 copies of one night. You're not Taylor Swift. Right. But if you look at the ability, which is why every Major League Baseball stadium right now is going to the print on demand, or even at Disney, they had the printing where you would select everything, and it was called D-Tech. You didn't have to worry about printing things in advance. You could buy the blanks.
Right.
And then you just put it through that world.
Yeah, that, again, one of the challenges I think we all have as human beings, I'm sure I have it in things I do, is, we go back to we've always done it this way. So, and I think that's an area we many years ago in a meeting with a car manufacturer who told us that about 80% of people who bought their car customized it in some way. And so we were like, so with print on demand, why am I getting the same brochure that everybody else is getting? Why are you not printing on demand the brochure that I want? Because I only care about safety features and you care about fast driving. And why is my brochure the same as your brochure? So I think a lot of these techs allow us now. I will tell you, I am not a fan of when they just let you QR code to see the program.
I agree.
Because again, what am I going to do? Take my phone up to the cast at the stage door?
I miss the ticket stubs.
Yes.
When you would go, and I would love to have the ability to get that printed. Yep. Even if it was fully like branded as Ticketmaster or whatever. Right. I miss having that for the scrapbook.
That's another, right? That's all part of the artifact of the experience. That ability to sit down and open up something and go through and go, oh man, I saw that band, I saw Queen in 1977 at the Nassau Coliseum,
I saw them in 2006, but it was with, before Adam Lambert. They had another touring guy that was doing everything. You
I
saw the
saw
original.
I saw Freddie Mercury.
Oh,
You know, that you want to be able to go back through those memories.
yeah.
Um,
Um, I've learned very quickly on our world. You and I can talk forever, and I think
yes,
there's a reason why Joe Rogan's podcasts are now up to 4 hours. I'm not going to do that with you. I will invite you back anytime. But before
thrilled.
we leave, I have to ask you a question.
Yes.
In the retail world, and this is going to be a big one, what's keeping you up at night, and what's giving you the reason to wake up in the morning?
So I'm going to start with the reason to wake up. I think retail has a great opportunity to connect people. You know, it's 2025. This is no different than 1975 when I was a kid. The mall is the place to go, right? We love that social aspect, and I think there's great opportunities. I think what keeps me up at night is knowing how little people look at ROI beyond the balance sheet. They just don't think, everything is bad. If I spend $1, I got to get $2 back. I got to, if I cut this, I can make, and nothing says, if I keep Dustin on the job, because he is awesome and he knows what he's doing. And yeah, he gets $5 an hour more than what I can hire somebody now today, or $20 an hour more than what I can hire today. But it's because of Dustin that people come to my store. There's no line item for that on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And I think we spend way too much time trying to figure out how to squeeze, which, listen, we need to save expenses. You don't need to be crazy. But I think the pendulum has gone too far to how can I squeeze, and not understanding how that's going to impact my experience, which at the end of the day impacts my sales and impacts my revenue.
What's your advice for the next generation? I know you're dealing a lot with it in real time.
Yeah.
And it's changed now. You can't talk to your family and to your daughter about here's how I got my job, like my first job. That doesn't exist anymore.
Right. I mean, to be fair, my daughter is 24, so she will tell me completely that I have no idea how the world works and no understanding, because she's the only person who knows how a job interview goes. But I think it is a big problem. Listen, I worked, you think about it today, again, I worked fast food jobs in high school. That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
As a high school person in a fair, good, solid middle class. It wasn't in an affluent neighborhood by any stretch. First jobs are becoming harder and harder because it's really easy to do some stuff, whether or not it's right, with AI that I might have given to a first-year person to learn. We don't have institutional knowledge because Bob is gone and he's the only person who really knew that story. And so I don't know how we're going to tell the next generation of store owners and shopkeepers and people coming up the pike what those things were like. It is hard. And on top of that, as a very broad generalization, because they particularly have come out in a post-COVID time and been very disrupted in their social experience, they're not always great socially. You know what I mean? And I say that with great affection. And you can read a blog post I just wrote about how bad I am at networking. It's going to be hard for them. And being in retail, because it doesn't have any gravitas that it used to have. Nope. And I don't know if gravitas is the right word, but, that sense of career path, it's going to be harder and harder to get them to be wanting to be part of an industry that treats them so badly.
Yep. And pylons are a tough thing when you're dealing with that.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very interesting. And obviously you are more than welcome. We can do this anytime you want.
Yeah.
I think your insights into evolution of functional to experiential and everything in between are incredible. Where can our viewers find you, and are you taking our conversations on the road? Because I'm sorry, we need to be in every single university for the next 5 years at least.
We do. And so first of all, love the idea of taking it on the road, ready in a heartbeat. So you can find me at belunified.com, bellunified.com. I also do have my, LinkedIn, of course. The good thing about when your last name is Polinchock is that every Polinchock in the United States is related. And I am the only David Polinchock. So you will find me pretty quickly. And those are probably the two best places to find me and see what I'm thinking about in terms of retail and where we're going with retail and how third place is going to impact, what we see in the future.
And obviously part of the Rethink Retail program.
Yeah,
it's
yes,
amazing how you don't realize the like-mindedness that comes from people being in the same organization that have never met each other, and then all of a sudden randomly get a text message, hey, do you want to walk?
I mean, that has been a great tool. And I know Rich Honeyball and I just did a podcast together about third places and retail. And it was the exact same thing. We were on one of those big calls one week and we kind of went, you think like I think. And we realized we were pretty kindred spirits. And that community has been I will say that has been an awesome community for both the inspiring each other, as well as the ability to be like, yeah, the world sucks, dude, but you're with us. You've got a family here.
Yeah. If we're all going down, we're going down together. It's all good. We know where the issues are, and it's typically QR codes. That's where it is.
That's right. If we just solve that problem, everything will be great.
Awesome. So thanks for anyone who made it this far. Absolutely incredible. If not, it doesn't matter. We had a great conversation.
We had a great time.
Thanks for joining us at the Immersive Lab. If you enjoyed it, do everything that you want to, but on our end, keep the conversations going, because the future of retail is coming from the history, and we need to talk about why the good old days should come back.
Right. Great.